Hi, I'm Bethany Rogers, and I'm here for a special edition of the Orlando Sentinel's Politics Now. Today we're hearing from a candidate for Windermere Town Council. I'm here joined today by Allen Pichon. There are two other candidates for this seat, John Armstrong and Mr. Richard Gonzalez, but they were not able to be here today. So we wanted to start with learning a little bit about Mr. Pichon here. So if you could kick it off with just telling us a few things about yourself.
I'd be glad to. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate the invitation from the Orlando Sentinel. Our roots actually go back, my family goes back to the late 40s. My dad was actually stationed at the Orlando Air Base. And so as a kid, they tell me stories where I actually was walking around Lake Eola. And as you guys know, Lake Eola is quite a sight. And even today, I still like it. But we moved because my dad's in the military, and I ended up in Spain as a teenager, spent 3 years there. Later went to the Air Force Academy, graduated, had a degree, Bachelor of Science in International Relations, went to pilot training, spent a year in Vietnam, have 1,000 hours of combat time, and I literally went back and got another master's of science, this time in logistics management. Now, why am I giving this? Because later on you'll see that all pays off. After that, I went and became a squadron commander. It's sort of a miniature mayor. I had 200 men, 18 airplanes, each worth about $50 million. We're going all over the world, so we had to take care of those people. I go from there to become the number 2 for the presidential wing. It's called the 89th Airlift Wing. And there I was serving underneath both Clinton and also Senior George Bush. From there I go into basically the retired area where I become into basically private industry, and I'm happy enough to go ahead and report that I also use that skills to go ahead and serve as the number 2 man in a $500 million company. All that stuff there led me into side issues like becoming a HOA president, and now of course I'm running for the one of the positions here on the Windermere Town Council.
Great. Okay, well, first question, what do you think of the proposed referendum to give the town borrowing authority for up to $4.2 million? And if the town does borrow this money, what projects should it tackle?
Well, quite candidly, I'm not in favor of it. It's $4.2 million. We basically take it from the revenue sharing trust fund for municipalities. The cost will be roughly about $200,000 per year for about 30 years. The reason I'm not for it is not the fact that we don't need improvements to our police department and departments. It's that we have other priorities. I really think, as an example, our roads are an important issue. Our sidewalks, we have problems with our sidewalks. Water runoff, retention, it impacts our lakes, so we need to put our attention there. The other part of this is that you're only seeing part of the picture. Really, we need to know what exactly the building is going to be, where it's going to be located. We don't have all those answers. So right now we're giving authority to borrow $4.2 million, but who's going to make those decisions downstream? It'll be the town council. And I think that the city and the residents ought to be part of that process.
Okay. Are there areas that you think should be annexed into the town of Windermere? And if so, what areas and why?
Well, you know, it's funny you ask that because that's been a topic of discussion for the last couple of town council meetings. And very simply, I've attended those meetings, and there are a couple of areas that they're very much interested in, like Islesworth and Chain de Lock, and I guess the Four Corners area up there, close to the Windermere Apopka Inland Road. The bottom line on this is that if you do choose these things, you need to be very careful because you can incur a lot of costs. Those areas that we're looking at already have infrastructure, so it would make sense to go ahead and annex them. In addition, they're very close to the lakes. And we want to protect our lakes. So if we have that opportunity, it would be good for our community, good for the environment. So in that case, I'm for those annexations.
Okay. And what are the ways you think that the town's charter should be updated?
Well, it's interesting you brought that up too. I'm actually on the Windermere Town Charter Committee. I'm the co-chairperson. I've been there for about the last 9 months, and what we're looking at is issues. The document's huge, it's about 65 pages, and it has a lot of redundant information. So this has given me a great opportunity to go through the statutes and all the other documentation there to find out what is redundant, what we don't need. The key things I'm interested in, because I'm a fiscal conservative, is trying to make sure that we go ahead and stay within our budget. So right now, as example, we're limited on borrowing to 12.5% of our budget. I think probably that's going to be discussed again, and when it does, it's going to go in front of the community. But those are the kind of issues that we're trying to work at, taking care of the taxes, making sure we stay within our budget, and frankly, making it a finer place to go ahead and live.
Okay. What are the biggest challenges that you think the town will face over the next couple of years, and how would you confront them?
Well, I think the biggest challenge is, of course, like we already talked about, the development. We are going to have to go ahead and look at which communities make sense to go ahead and add. The second issue that we have to face is traffic. And I'm not sure you're aware or not, but with the COI growing so much, we actually have so much traffic, especially in the morning during the school time and later on at night about 10 o'clock. The traffic volume is huge. So one of the issues we're looking at out there is putting in a roundabout there at Windermere and McGuire Roads. And there will also be some other discussions about trying to expand the roads around the school so we can eliminate some of the traffic from the families who want to pick up their children. So those are two of the principal areas, but the last part there is, again, trying to stay and do the right things for infrastructure. Right now, they've put together a plan of about $1.4 million for reserves. We need to continue to have those reserves there so we can improve the roads, improve sidewalks, do the right things with regard to water retention.
And finally, what initiatives would you like to propose if you were elected?
Well, I think that's a really great area to go ahead and ask, because as I look into the Windermere Town Council, one of the things I like to see, of course, is that how do we go ahead and streamline that council? In other words, we bring up issues, but because of the Sunshine Law, we cannot go ahead and discuss those things. It looks like to me that we could have workshops, though, where we invite the public. We could even have the council members interacting. And those workshops there would enable the council to go ahead and prepare for some of these agenda items, which would make things a lot easier as far as making decisions. Clearly, the other part I'm interested in there is the environmental issues with regard to the lakes, the runoffs, and things like that. Believe it or not, we have dirt roads. I think it's great. I love it. That's part of the charm of why we moved there. We only have a very small community. Like I said, it's only 3,000 people, $5 million budget, only 31 people. But gosh, we got to do the best we can with that money, and I think those initiatives to get us going will be the ones I'd like to focus on.
Okay, anything you'd like to say in closing?
Well, I want to thank you again for inviting me. Very simply, I have a very mixed background there in terms of being military and also in private industry. And I think that background helps me, because when you run the kind of companies I do, you have to have experience with taxes, you have to have experience with EPA, you have to have experience with the FAA. All these issues and government issues is similar to what I'll be going into with regard to the town council. And I think I did very well, and I hope to do well again. And I thank you for inviting me, and I'm asking for our residents' vote.
All right, well, thank you so much for joining us. For more news on this and other races, check out www.orlandosentinel.com.